legislators, doesn't own our newspapers, our journals, and everything else. And we, in fact, are free to make those drugs the way we know we can. And we have been for my entire 40-year career. That's when we'll win.
Yeah, it's astounding that the regulation of drugs and the manufacturing of drugs is conducted by people who are not healers. They are bureaucrats and
they have a vested interest. They're making a lot of money to not make these healing products. So my experience in the cannabis industry is something that, I'm in California right now, that I now can, I can't even tell you the benefit I can get from a whole plant extract, CO2 extracted, $20. So after all the regulations and the licensing that the manufacturers have to get, and somebody's got somebody's hands in the pockets, it probably costs the patient hundreds, if not thousands. And this is where medicine is broken. It needs to end. And so we still give it at $20.
Well, it seems completely unethical, and it's just wrong, if I want to put a word to it, that millions of dollars go into subsidizing the research that's being conducted by the pharmaceutical industry in the United States, and then having received all of that money to conduct the research and develop the drugs that they are developing, then they're basically gouging the patients and justifying it because they've had to do all of this research to get their drugs approved, but without telling you that, they received subsidies to do the research to get these drugs approved. So it just seems criminal almost.
It's criminal, and it's at every level of our government. I was exactly that. I was a National Cancer Institute, and that's the Bayh-Dole Act of, I think, 1983. So BAYH Dole Act. We could repeal that act right away, because what it said was that government workers and government employees could patent. Just like I told you that government holds the patent on cannabis therapies, could patent their research. No. I say taxpayers paid for my entire education. They turned the lights on in the building for the 22 years I worked at the National Cancer Institute. They own, the taxpayer owns everything. There is no intellectual property in my world. It's all God's and the taxpayers. They paid for it all.
Yeah. Well, and the scientists are just getting the bum rap all around if they contradict the corporate interests.
Absolutely. The scientists are, unless they're the ones who are bought and paid for, like you said, so many of the scientists are, we're not committing the crimes. We didn't cover up the data. We didn't cut, and my friends, but many of my friends, when faced with the kinds of decisions that we had to make, for which, Dr. Rossetti and myself, there is no choice. We show all the data. We don't use statistics. We don't cover it up. And I'm certainly sorry that I lost my entire life's earnings, many of my friends, much of my family, my reputation. I'm certainly sorry about that. But there's nothing, many of my friends lost their lives. We escaped. That's why we tell the stories in Plague of Corruption, because some of them are quite entertaining. God has a sense of humor, we like to say, but there is no choice. But many of my colleagues in science and medicine simply don't know. And that's why we wrote the books, and that's why Dr. Rossetti and I educate on cannabis and on many other topics, and try to educate those doctors, because doctors would never, ever, ever want to hurt a patient, and they're being lied to, just like they've had no education on cannabis, they've had no education on nutrition, they've had no education on vaccines. So we can restore faith in the promise of science. It's not science that's the problem. It's the corruption in science. And unfortunately, it's the highest levels of our government. The very people that are supposed to be protecting you are profiting. And and taking money while our economy and the health of our families is failing.
Well, we're at war with facts right now, and this is a problem that it's permeating every aspect of our society right now. And you've got people in bubbles listening to one side of a story, not getting all of the facts, and facts are irrelevant really when it comes to the politics of this, and especially when it comes to the special interests. So, it's a godsend actually that you were able to use your intellect to bring these stories to the public. And like I said early on in this interview, I really believe that the information you set forth in your books is really, really valuable and could save lives. So, and I hope that ultimately we get beyond this period in our history when facts are the enemy and really start paying attention to science again. I mean, I look with astonishment every single day when I see things happening, like, in 2017, when the facts about climate change were removed from the EPA website. It's like, why? What planet are these people going to live on when they destroy this one? And aren't these people also affected by the vaccines that we're giving children and pregnant women?
Right.
It just makes me wonder, what kind of vacuum they must be living in, and is money that important that you have to sacrifice human life for it? It just makes no sense to me. So,
There's
yeah.
there's a great, well, I mean, I think the fact of the matter is, these people are public health officials, and it is worldwide. It's the WHO, the World Health Organization. It's Bill Gates. It's Rockefellers. It's the people who own, that it is a genocide, and I'd like to say it is a Holocaust. And it's just, we've decided who's going to be the fittest, and who can live, and who dies. I mean, and it's the same. There's a fabulous book by David Lewis called Science for Sale. And he's the Judy Michowitz within the Environmental Protection Agency. And, the Environmental Protection Agency, the only thing they're protecting are the agency heads and the people who know what's happening to our earth, who know the contamination of our soil, who know that, they're blaming the wrong people. And there's, it is bad, but I think the day is now. I think we've won. I think because of things like your show, that and the internet. I mean, intelligent people can read books and find out, and we believe our lying eyes. All we have to do is look at the movie Vaxxed, and now Vaxxed 2, which is the people's truth. And Andy Wakefield, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Dr. Susanna Humphreys, Del Bigtree, Polly Tommey, in this movement, they simply filmed the vaccine injured, showed you how many they were, and then showed you the vaccine free. So when people start realizing, how can a perfectly healthy child put somebody at risk? How can somebody who's never been injected with a pathogen be infectious? And if your vaccine works to develop immunity, which they don't, none on the market does, and none has ever been safety tested. So now people can realize this, because, of course, if we had if the vaccine works, why do you worry if my child is not vaccinated, or if I'm not? Because, vaccinated does not equal immune. And that's what we have learned the hard way over the last 40 years. And so to simply restore liability to companies, and take away the power of these agencies that are corrupting. They have anything but our public health in mind. And we could balance the budget immediately. Just close the Centers for Disease Control. All they're doing is controlling the development of disease, which is, I guess, their goal, because they're not preventing anything, and all they're preventing is us from healing using therapies like cannabis therapies, which they well know will heal and will prevent the kind of injuries we're seeing. We can develop a safe vaccine, and we can develop safe therapeutics from plants the way we used to. It doesn't have to cost the kind of money it costs. And as you said, this is just ridiculous. I developed some of those drugs back in the 80s, and they don't cost 10 cents. Why are they charging $10,000?
Such a good point. Well, it's such important information, and I think that the work that you do is incredibly important. And I'm so sorry that you've had to endure the ridicule and the smear campaigns and the life threats and all of those things. And it pains me that any scientist doing their job for greater good has had to endure anything like this. And, we see a lot of holistic medical professionals, taking their own lives, and we see people ostracized, even USDA scientists basically exiled to Kansas, away from their laboratories because, somehow they're getting in the way of corporate interests. And I mean, there's no other way to say that. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It's just simply a fact.
Yeah.
And it's inexcusable that we are tolerating this as people, and to call it a Holocaust in a way, not to take away from the gravity of what happened in Germany in the 40s. But really, when you consider that 40,000 people a year are dying because of a handful of drugs that doctors were told by the manufacturers were safe, and they didn't have any disclosures to work with that would say that these drugs will either kill you or create addiction that'll lead to heroin addiction, it's criminal. And quite frankly, I keep thinking that they should be charged with crimes against humanity. Forget these $40 million lawsuits. It's a drop in the bucket for them.
Right. It's the cost of doing business. No, they should be charged with crimes against humanity. I gave a talk at the Truth About Cancer a few weeks ago here in Anaheim, and I was asked to give the title of the talk I was asked to give was Persecution and Cover-Up. And I showed pictures of these criminals, these heads of departments, these heads of NIH, of NIAID, of the pharmaceutical companies, and the list of names, and the call to action was to charge them with crimes against humanity, because it's so much more than, and I think the only good news behind the opioid crisis is that people are waking up and they can see it, and people are waking up and realizing, the FDA approved the most powerful opioid ever a few weeks ago. And it's like, you're kidding me, right? And that these criminals are not prosecuted in a $40 billion lawsuit. And it goes with glyphosate as well, with Roundup, with Monsanto, with GMO. It's so big, but it could be stopped. The cost of doing business is $100 million. You've been causing cancer, that our constitutional rights, the data have been censored, our very freedom for the Nuremberg Code not to be used as human test subjects when none of these vaccines have been tested. They do post-licensure marketing, as you'll see when you get to the end of the book. It's criminal, and it needs to all stop today. And when our freedoms are restored, we'll use cannabis and every other natural product and natural way of healing. And it's pretty easy. That's why I always use the Magic Johnson example, because when he got infected, everybody was dying, and I never thought we could fix it, and we did. So the science is there, the compassion, the humanity, the brilliance is there, and all we have to do. And that's why your show and shows like your show are so important, because it wakes everybody up to realize that we can have a better world.